I think one of the things that is sort of like this barrier that we build up in our brains is that now there are a lot of podcasts, right? And for a lawyer or somebody in the legal world who wants to go out and make a podcast right now, what they might be saying to themselves is, everybody's got a podcast. How do I cut through the noise? How should I go about standing out? So what would you say to those people who are sort of, I don't know, apprehensive to start their own show because they think they have no shot at promoting it?
Well, I will, at the risk of burning some of the goodwill I've generated with some of your listeners, I'll say you're asking the wrong question. You're thinking about it wrong, because you're not trying to compete with other podcasts. It's not what you're trying to do. If there's another injury podcast, you're not competing with them. That's like saying, why would I create a website when, Joe Blow, injury attorney down the street, has a website? He's already got one. What's in it for me? And that's really the question you should be asking, because it's your podcast. It's not a podcast about personal injury. People aren't going to sit around in their spare time and listen to personal injury podcast. They're there because they have a problem. And most of the people who find your show are going to find it on your website. That's where we are right now. Listener behavior, consumer behavior is shifting. People are starting to understand that their podcast search engine is a place for answers. They're getting there. It's only going to get better, especially now that, the king of search, Google, is in there. Like Google Podcast is in there, and they're using search in their podcast. That is going to end up becoming very, very good. But I think almost all of us could probably agree, if I have a problem, I'm not going to my podcast search engine just yet. But that is going to shift. But right now, they're generally going to be finding out about it on your social channels. They're going to be finding about it in ads. I love to use some of the promotional content from the podcast, those little video clips, to run ads. Those are excellent ways to increase brand awareness and drive people to your podcast. But by and large, most people are going to find it on your website. They've already decided that they would like to know more about you. Now it's your time to capture them. They're on the website. Don't let them leave. And we don't let them leave by creating compelling content that keeps them there and nurtures them, gets them past that friction point. And so that kind of almost erases the question of, why should I have one? Because other people do. It doesn't matter that other people do. Now, I'll tell you, if you don't have one and somebody else does, now they're nurturing a lead in a way that you are not. So they might go to 5 attorneys' websites and try to get information. They can read your blogs. They can, watch your videos with all your books behind you, and they can learn about your 900 years of experience. But we want to bring them into our world a little bit. We want them to feel like they know us a little bit, get our sense of humor a little bit. Like, oh, I like that guy's energy. Or more importantly, I know that there's people in the world that listen to me and go, that guy is too high strung for me. I don't think I can work with him. I need that. I need people to go, that's not the guy for me. Because the last thing I want is somebody in a relationship with me and we start going, this doesn't fit. Like, you're really buttoned up and I'm really ready to seize the day. And I think that's really important as well, as we let people in, we let them get a little piece of who we are, our vibe, our energy, who our firm is, what we're about. And so you're not really competing with all the other podcasts. But I had a lawyer that I had done some cold messaging to, and he messaged me back. He's like, this is good timing. He's like, I've really been thinking about a podcast. I think it'd be really cool. He said, but I feel like my niche is saturated. And I said, okay, maybe it is. I wasn't combative with him or anything. And after the call, I went and did a little bit of search on him. I looked at his website. He had a pretty active blog, as most lawyers do. I think it's important. He had a pretty active YouTube channel. Again, it was most of like, hey, look at all my books type of stuff, but he was spending time and energy and money creating it. And then I looked for podcasts in his specific niche. There were 2. And then you look at the numbers on blogs, tens of millions of blogs, tens of millions. But that was still a good use of his time. 51 million YouTube channels, still a good use of his time. We're at roughly 2 million podcasts total right now. And he felt like 2 in his niche made it saturated. And that's the way that some people think about it. But I think that, I don't blame them, because I think, especially for lawyers, that we're always scared of the new shiny thing. That, like, what is this thing that you're trying to sell me that I don't need, and you're going to take all my money and not give me anything for it? I mean, we saw it with websites. We saw it with social media. I had a I had a bit, one of my professors, business law in undergrad, told me that no lawyer worth his salt would ever put his face on a billboard because they rely on referrals. And I didn't know much about marketing at that time, but that's an insane statement. And what he was really trying to get across was you don't need to market. A good lawyer doesn't need to market. And I think anybody listening to a podcast like this probably would see the absurdity in that statement as well. Sure, are there a handful out there that just have it on lock? But that's the thing. What about next generation? What about when, the woman who started the firm hangs it up and she's not there to keep pushing it and the brand starts to deteriorate and it starts to fracture? What then? How do you tell your story? How do you get it out there? How do you make sure people still know who you are? And so the idea that we don't need marketing is it's an archaic idea. And so I think podcasts are just the next evolution and just a real beautiful step too, because it gives you that power to tell your story with your voice directly to your clients.